I was sipping lukewarm decaf in my kitchen. My doctor banned me from real coffee after what he politely called a heart rhythm that sounds like jazz, when I realized two things at once. First, my Christmas tree lights were flickering in a way that suggested either a loose wire or an angry poltergeist. Second, my ex-wife had just announced on social media that she and her new husband were renewing their vows in Maui for the holiday season, surrounded by love, light, and the beauty of second chances. The post had 52 heart emojis. 52. I counted. If you've ever wondered what motivates a 76-year-old billionaire to hire a matchmaking agency days before Christmas, now you know. But defiance. And maybe, buried somewhere under the rubble of old grudges, a tiny spark of loneliness I'd spent years pretending wasn't there. My name is Walter Harrington, by the way. Walt to friends, Mr. Harrington to people who want money from me, and that stubborn old mule, to my ex-wife, Patricia. She's a real estate shark with diamonds on her fingers and opinions on absolutely everything, especially me. And she had infuriatingly good timing. The vow renewal announcement went up right as I finished writing the holiday checks for my staff. Nothing makes a man feel more like a sentimental relic than paying his gardener a Christmas bonus while his ex-wife displays her new bronzed trophy husband on a beach. So yes, I took it personally. And I did something most 76-year-old men don't do. I opened my laptop, Googled elite matchmaking agency, and clicked on the first one that didn't look like it specialized in Russian bots or blackmail. Euphoria Matchmaking. 4 discerning hearts and serious commitments. The gold serif font practically sparkled. And there, on the front page, smiling like she personally insured every client's happily ever after. Grace Delacroix, founder. The name meant nothing to me then. Later, it would mean far too much. I scheduled an appointment for the same afternoon. If I'd waited even 5 minutes, I might have talked myself out of it, poured another cup of decaf, and tried to pretend Patricia's vow renewal photos didn't make my blood pressure tap dance. But I didn't wait. That was mistake number 1. Euphoria Matchmaking's office sat in a renovated brick townhouse on West 12th Street, the sort of place with pricey scented candles that smell like French holidays and sofas so white I felt guilty breathing on them. A receptionist guided me to a private office where Grace Delacroix waited, standing by a window, arms crossed loosely, back straight. She looked mid-40s, maybe early 50s if I used the lighting in my favor. Dark hair pulled into a loose twist, a black tailored dress, and an expression that walked a curious line between professional warmth and the kind of knowing smirk therapists give right before asking about your childhood trauma. "Mr. Harrington," she said as she extended her hand. "I never thought you'd be the type to seek a matchmaker." I blinked. "And what type is that?" "The type who thinks he doesn't need anyone." I almost left right then. Nobody talks to me like that, except Patricia, and she doesn't count. But Grace kept her hand out, steady, patient, unmoved. And something in her posture told me walking out would be the exact reaction she expected. So I shook her hand. "Let's begin," I said. "I need someone ideal." "That's quite a word," she replied, gesturing for me to sit. Her office was framed in soft gold light from a desk lamp, with books arranged not by color or size but by use. Relationship psychology, communication theory, a few novels, and, most surprising, an early edition of Harrington's Guide to Ethical Business Growth, written by yours truly. She saw me noticing it. "I like knowing who I'm working with," she said simply. I wasn't sure I liked that at all. We talked for nearly an hour. Or rather, she questioned, I resisted, and she waited until I stopped resisting. Grace had that unnerving talent therapists and interrogators share, silence so thick you feel compelled to fill it. "Why now?" she asked, leaning back. "Why not?" I countered. "Because most men don't seek companionship as an act of revenge." I opened my mouth, closed it, adjusted my tie even though it didn't need adjusting. She arched one brow. "So I'm wrong?" I hated how much I disliked admitting the truth. "My ex-wife is renewing her vows in Hawaii," I muttered, "with a man whose shirts appear to be perpetually unbuttoned." Grace's lips fought not to smile. "So you want someone impressive to arrive on your arm for Christmas?" I didn't say that. "You didn't need to." She scribbled something in her notebook. I was 90% sure it was not flattering. "Here's my professional promise," she said. "If you trust the process, I will introduce you to women who fit your personality and life. Beautiful, accomplished, intelligent women. But I won't help you wage a holiday war with your ex-wife. I'm paying you quite handsomely. And I'm telling you how I work." I stared at her. She stared right back, unblinking. This woman would have made an excellent poker player. Or a terrifying judge. Finally I sighed. Fine. No wars. She smiled. Wonderful. Now, tell me what you actually want. I expected that question to be simple. A checklist. Age range, interests, maybe a fondness for dogs. Instead, something in her tone made the question feel larger. Deeper. As if she wanted to know the thing beneath the thing. What did I want? After a long moment I said, someone who doesn't care that I'm wealthy. Someone who isn't dazzled. Someone who doesn't see a bank account first. Genuine connection, she noted. If it exists. It does. You say that with alarming confidence. I've watched it happen. Even in cases far more complicated than yours. Mine isn't complicated. Her stare said otherwise. You've been divorced for 23 years, Mr. Harrington. And, you mentioned this earlier, you haven't had a serious romantic relationship since. I've been busy. You've been hiding. I beg your pardon. She held up a hand. Not in a cowardly way. More like a turtle. A very wealthy turtle inside a very large shell. I nearly choked. A turtle? A charming one. Nobody wants to date a turtle. Exactly. That's why you're here. I wasn't sure whether to storm out or ask her to repeat that speech to my board of directors just to see their faces. Instead I said, can we proceed? She closed her notebook. We'll start with 3 introductions. I'll curate profiles and you'll approve or decline them. But you need to be honest with me. If something bothers you, say it. If something excites you, say that too. Excites? I'm 76, not dead. I've met dead people who showed more emotional range than you've shown in the last hour. I stared at her. She grinned. And against my will, I felt the first crack of amusement sneak in. When was the last time someone talked to me like that? Without hesitation, without fear, without calculation? It had been decades. Grace walked around the desk and extended a tablet toward me. Your first candidate. You'll meet her tomorrow if you approve. I took the tablet, telling myself I felt nothing. No anticipation, no nerves, no curiosity. The lie lasted 6 seconds. Candidate 1. Lucinda Hale, age 58, attorney, philanthropist, avid hiker. A smile too white to be real and hair that probably required its own budget. Her profile photo was taken at the top of some mountain at sunrise, and she looked like she'd climbed it without sweating. I respect the ambition, I said diplomatically. But she seems intense. She's a very direct woman, Grace acknowledged. Smart, successful, and deeply loyal once she commits. Does she commit often? No. Why not? She says she prefers solitude to settling. Reminds you of anyone? I scowled. Grace didn't apologize. I set the tablet down. Let's meet her. Grace nodded. Good. I'll arrange dinner at Carlisle's, tomorrow at 7. As I stood to leave, she said something curious, so casual I almost missed it. I'm glad you came today, Walter. It's time. For what? I asked. Her eyes softened. Not in a romantic way. More like she was seeing an old photograph nobody else could see. For your life to start again. And something in my chest shifted, quietly, like a door unlocking from the inside. The next evening started perfectly. Which should have been my first warning. Lucinda arrived exactly on time, dressed in red, hair curled like a magazine cover. She extended her hand with polished confidence. Walter, she said warmly. Grace speaks very highly of you. She does. I tried not to sound surprised. She says you're complicated but worth the effort. I grunted. I'm sure she meant that kindly. She meant it accurately. Dinner began pleasantly enough. Lucinda had an elegant laugh and stories that suggested a life lived in expensive shoes. She asked good questions, sharp, probing, lawyerly questions, and paid attention to my answers. But then it happened. Halfway through the main course, she asked. So, tell me about Patricia. My fork froze. My ex-wife. Yes. Grace said she's part of the reason you came to her. I mentally cursed Grace Delacroix. I didn't come because of Patricia, I said tightly. I came because I wanted a change. Lucinda tilted her head, studying me like a witness on the stand. And this change conveniently aligns with your ex's vow renewal. I didn't say that. You didn't need to. Good Lord, was this a trend among women Grace selected? I'm not interested in revisiting that chapter, I insisted. So you're looking for a fresh start? Something like that. With someone emotionally grounded? Capable of communication? Yes. Someone mature? Self-assured. Yes. Someone who won't repeat the mistakes of your marriage? I would hope so. She gave a small, satisfied smile. Good. I appreciate your honesty. Then she took a sip of wine and added, for what it's worth, you're doing better than most men your age. Better. At hiding your defensiveness. I nearly inhaled a piece of salmon. Lucinda didn't laugh. She didn't wink. She just resumed eating, utterly calm. And for the first time since Patricia's vow renewal post, I wondered whether diving back into dating at my age was an act of courage or insanity. The rest of dinner passed smoothly, but when we parted outside the restaurant, Lucinda shook my hand firmly. You're an intriguing man, she said, but I'm not sure you're ready for someone like me. I swallowed a retort. And why is that? Because I need a partner who knows what he wants. You're still figuring that out. Then she kissed my cheek, a professional kiss, not a romantic one, and walked away, leaving me on the sidewalk, bewildered, annoyed, and strangely invigorated. The next morning, I returned to Euphoria matchmaking. Grace was already waiting for me, seated on a white sofa with her legs crossed, a cup of tea in hand. Well, she asked. She interrogated me, I complained. She's a lawyer. You expected karaoke? She said I'm not ready for someone like her. Grace sipped her tea. Is she right? No. She raised a brow. I hesitated. Maybe. A faint smile tugged the corner of her lips. Don't worry. The process is designed to challenge you. I thought it was designed to find me a partner. It is. Sometimes challenge is part of that. I sat down across from her. Grace, answer me honestly. Did you tell her about Patricia? Only that she's part of your history. Nothing more. She seemed to know more. That's because she's perceptive, Walter. Not because I broke confidentiality. I studied her. Grace didn't flinch. She didn't drop her gaze or hide behind clipboards and jargon. She met my stare with steady calm, the sort of calm people develop after surviving storms. Do you always do this? I asked. Do what? See through people. Her expression shifted. A small, private softness. Something unguarded. Only when I have to, she said. Then she stood, smoothing her dress. Your second introduction will be ready tomorrow. I think you'll like her. I watched her walk to her desk. Her poise, her silence, the subtle way she understood too much, it all felt familiar in a way I couldn't place. But I brushed that thought aside. I had no idea that the real story, the one with love, betrayal, irony, and a twist I never saw coming, had already begun. And it began with a woman who wasn't on the candidate list at all. That night, long after dinner and decaf and the soft glow of the Christmas tree, I realized something unsettling. I kept thinking about Grace Delacroix. Not romantically. Not exactly. More like an itch in the back of my mind, the kind you can't scratch because you don't know where it's coming from. Her voice. Her certainty. The way she'd said, for your life to start again. Who says something like that to a client on day one? Someone who knows more than she should. Someone who sees something you don't. Someone who, maybe, knows you. But that was ridiculous. Grace Delacroix was a stranger. Or so I thought. At 76, I should have known better. Nothing that looks like coincidence ever truly is. Not at Christmas. Not in my life. Not in hers. I woke up the next morning with a very distinct sensation that my life had shifted half an inch to the left sometime during the night. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet tilt, the kind you only notice when something that shouldn't be on your mind absolutely refuses to get off it. Specifically, Grace Delacroix. A professional matchmaker shouldn't occupy space in a man's head the way she did mine. She wasn't on the candidate list. She wasn't a potential partner. She wasn't even particularly friendly. She was more like a very elegant therapist who enjoyed diagnosing you without the courtesy of charging by the hour. Still, there I was, staring at my kitchen window, toast in hand, thinking about the way she said it's time with that maddening confidence of hers. I distracted myself by watering a poinsettia that, according to its care label, was already on the brink of death. That made two of us, the plant and my patience. Fortunately, distraction arrived in the form of a text from Grace. Candidate 2, brunch at 11. Her name is Helena Brooks. Be on time. This one doesn't forgive lateness. I muttered something unprintable. Nothing motivates punctuality more than fear of being scolded by a stranger before noon. The restaurant chosen for the meeting was one of those minimalist places designed by someone who despises chairs with backs. Everything was glass, wood, and discomfort. Very modern. Very irritating. Helena Brooks sat by the window, posture military straight, cheekbones sharp enough to slice bread. Early 60s, silver blonde hair in a sleek bob, black blazer, pearl earrings, the sort of woman who probably never got a parking ticket in her life because traffic officers took one look at her and instinctively apologized. She rose as I approached. "Walter Harrington," she said, extending her hand with brisk efficiency. "It's a pleasure." "Likewise." She gestured for me to sit, then placed her napkin in her lap with surgical precision. I hadn't even unfolded mine before she spoke again. "So," she said, "you're the man Grace calls a stubborn romantic in denial." My jaw nearly hit the table. "She said that?" "Oh yes. She adores giving people labels. Mine, apparently, is rigorously principled. Which is polite code for controlling." I laughed, surprised. "She said that about you?" "Verbatim." That softened my defenses. Grace had given the first candidate an ominous compliment, but Helena? Helena she'd roasted. I respected that. Our server approached. Helena ordered a green smoothie that looked like lawn trimmings. I ordered pancakes large enough to smother a small child. As the plates arrived, Helena folded her hands and said, "I've read about your company. You were quite ruthless in your early years. I prefer the term determined." "That's fair. And yet you stepped down from active leadership at 65. A decade earlier than most men in your position. I've always wondered why." Her question wasn't hostile. Just direct. The way some people peel apples with frightening speed. I took a measured sip of coffee. "My father worked until the day he died," I said. "I didn't want that for myself." "Balance," Helena said approvingly. "A man who knows his limits." "That's generous." "It's accurate." I found myself relaxing. She was sharp but not cruel. Her words carried intention, not ego. "So," she said after a moment, "tell me what you're looking for." I leaned back. "Someone who enjoys good conversation. Someone grounded. Someone who doesn't want to turn life into a performance." "You mean someone unlike your ex-wife?" I paused. "Yes," I admitted. "Exactly." Helena nodded as though confirming a hypothesis. "I don't perform. I don't play games. I don't manipulate. If you ask me a question, I'll answer it truthfully. And I expect the same." "I can do honesty," I said. "We'll see." Her eyes held mine a beat longer than necessary. "Not flirtation, evaluation. You know," she continued, "I almost didn't agree to meet you." "Oh. I prefer men who are emotionally available. Your first interview with Grace suggested otherwise." I frowned. "What else did she tell you?" "Only that you've built walls around yourself for so long, she's not sure you remember what life feels like without them." I swallowed hard. Helena took a careful sip of her smoothie. "Do you?" "That's a complicated question." "So is your answer." I let out a slow breath. "Lucinda said I wasn't ready." She wasn't wrong. That isn't comforting. It isn't meant to be. She was relentless, but in a strangely admirable way. And unlike Lucinda, she didn't seem interested in poking emotional bruises for sport. She was simply mapping the terrain. "You're not a bad man, Walter," she said quietly. "You're a lonely one. There's a difference." I stared at her. The restaurant hummed with brunch chatter around us, the clink of plates and soft jazz overhead making a strangely cinematic backdrop. Lonely. I hadn't heard that word spoken about me, not since my mother died. Most people assumed being wealthy insulated you from such things. They were wrong, of course. Money solves many problems, but never the ones that grow in silence. "What about you?" I asked. "Why are you using a matchmaker?" She took a long breath, then said, "Because my husband died 7 years ago." I softened. "I'm sorry." "So am I." She folded her napkin with steady hands. "He was a good man. And I've dated since, but nothing serious. I kept waiting to feel something that wasn't there. And now I'd like to meet someone who is comfortable with who he is, and still open to who he could be." I felt that one in my ribs. We talked for nearly 2 hours. About work, life, widowhood, regrets, investments, travel, and the absurdity of holiday decorations that cost more than cars. When the check came, Helena reached for her purse. "I've got it," I said. "No, we can split." "Helena." "That's final," she said in a tone that could halt traffic. We split. Outside, a light snowfall dusted the sidewalk. "It was nice meeting you, Walter," she said. "You're more human than I expected." "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is." She hesitated only a second before adding, if Grace asks, and she will, tell her the truth, you're still looking inward more than outward. But you have potential. Potential. A word usually reserved for interns and houseplants. But Helena said it with a spark of kindness. She squeezed my hand briefly, then stepped into a waiting car. When I arrived back at Euphoria Matchmaking later that afternoon, Grace wasn't in her usual place. Instead, her assistant, a young man who looked permanently startled, led me to a small sitting room. She'll be right with you, he said before vanishing like a spooked deer. A moment later, Grace entered. No notebook today. No tablet. Just her. You met Helena, she said. You could say she dismantled me politely. That sounds like her. I crossed my arms. Why do all your candidates know exactly where to poke? Because they're emotionally literate adults, she replied. A refreshing rarity. I'm emotionally literate. Grace actually laughed, soft but real. You're emotionally fluent in sarcasm. Everything else is debatable. That's unfair. Accurate. I huffed. She said I have potential. Grace smiled. She was being kind. I'm aware. You don't seem upset. I'm 76, Grace. I don't get upset over feedback. I get annoyed. There's a difference. Her smile deepened. So, brunch went well? Surprisingly. Would you see her again? I hesitated. Maybe. Not romantically. She feels like someone I could respect. Even admire. But it didn't have spark. And you want spark? Well, I'm not shopping for a tax advisor. She tilted her head. You're not wrong. Then she stepped closer, just enough for her perfume, something warm and understated, to reach me. I'm glad you're taking this seriously, she said softly. It matters. I said I would. I know. She studied my face carefully, as though reading something between the lines. You're changing. I'm what? Changing, she repeated. Just a little. But it's there. My pulse did something inconvenient. Is that good? Yes, she said. It's very good. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Something in the silence felt charged, not romantic, not flirtatious, not anything easily named. Just charged. The way a room feels before a storm breaks. Then she stepped back, professional veneer restored. There is a third candidate, she said. Her name is... Before she could finish, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, expression tightening almost imperceptibly. My apologies, she said. I need to take this. It won't be long. She slipped out of the room. I sat there alone, staring at the ornate molding on the ceiling, thinking about Helena's words, Lucinda's bluntness, and Grace's strange, lingering remark. You're changing. I didn't feel changed. I felt unsettled. And then I heard it. Through the thin wall. Grace's voice. From uncharacteristically shaky. Yes, she said. I know what day it is. You don't have to remind me. Silence. It doesn't matter what he knows, she continued. What matters is what he remembers. Another silence. No. I won't tell him yet. He's not ready. My breath caught. Not ready? Not ready for what? More silence. I understand. I'll handle it. Then footsteps. I managed to sit up just as she re-entered, her expression smoothed over like fresh paint. Now, she said as if nothing had happened, about your third introduction. I raised a hand. Grace. She paused. Yes. Who was on the phone? Just business. That didn't sound like business. Her mask didn't crack, but her pupils tightened just enough for me to see it. Walter, she said calmly, everyone has personal matters. Does this personal matter involve me? No. It was too quick. Too rehearsed. She saw the doubt on my face, and her voice softened, not warm, not placating, just careful. You don't need to worry, she said. Everything is fine. But something in her tone betrayed her. And something in me woke up. A flicker. A recognition I couldn't place but couldn't ignore. She moved on before I could push further. Your third introduction will be tomorrow evening. A bit different from the others. Someone warmer, more spontaneous. Grace. We'll talk then, she said firmly. And the conversation was, unmistakably, over. I left the agency with snow gathering on my shoulders and a question clawing the back of my mind. What wasn't she telling me? Why did she say he's not ready? Who was the he? Was it me? That night, I sat in my living room with the tree lights blinking lazily, casting the walls in soft reds and greens. A sentimental glow, perfect for reflection. Or brooding. I thought about Grace's tone on that call, the tension beneath the poise. The familiarity in her voice. The way she looked at me sometimes, as though examining an old puzzle she'd solved years ago. And a strange suspicion crept in. Not a conclusion. Not even a theory. Just a whisper of a possibility. What if Grace Delacroix hadn't been a stranger at all? What if our paths had crossed long before Euphoria matchmaking? What if she knew me, from a chapter of my life I'd forgotten? The idea was absurd. Impossible. And yet, it wouldn't leave. Christmas does that, stirs ghosts you didn't invite. I stared at the lights, listening to them hum faintly, thinking about the past I never revisited, and the woman who spoke to someone on the phone as though she were guarding a secret that had my name on it. A secret I wasn't ready for. Apparently. The snow thickened outside. The house felt too quiet. And somewhere in the quiet, a truth I didn't yet know was heading straight for me, wrapped in ribbon and irony, waiting to explode at the worst possible moment. I had no idea that Candidate 3 would be the spark. But Grace already knew. Of course she did. She always knew more than she said. If there's one thing life never warned me about, it's how dangerous anticipation becomes after 70. At 20, anticipation makes your heart race. At 40, it makes you buy things you don't need. At 70, it makes you question your sanity, your wardrobe, and your cholesterol level all before breakfast. I woke up earlier than usual the next morning, which in my case means I saw the sunrise, an event rare enough that I briefly wondered if I was dying. But no. I simply had a meeting scheduled at the Eternal Heart Agency, and somewhere in the cobwebbed attic of my emotional life, a spark had gone off at the thought of seeing Evelyn again. Evelyn. Sharp-minded, impossible to intimidate Evelyn, whose smile came like a reward you didn't entirely deserve but still hoped for. I told myself it was professional interest. Purely professional. Absolutely, unquestionably professional. And then I spent 20 minutes choosing a sweater. That should have been my first red flag. When I arrived, the Eternal Heart office door gave its usual theatrical squeak, like a mouse trying to warn the whole building about my presence. Evelyn stood behind the desk, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned back in a way that made her look both elegant and ready to fight a legal battle. She glanced up, and something in her eyes softened just a fraction. "Well," she said, "you're early. I prefer the term, punctual. Sounds like I have my life together." "You don't," she replied, "but I appreciate the optimism." She gestured for me to sit. A neat stack of folders waited on the desk like obedient soldiers ready for battle. "I've curated more profiles for you," she said. "Candidates who better match your unique criteria." "My criteria," I said, "were mostly spite-driven. That's what made curating them a challenge." I leaned back. "You enjoy a challenge. And you enjoy pretending you don't." Her deadpan delivery made me smile despite myself. If she'd been a few decades younger, or I a few decades less creaky, I might have mistaken the whole exchange for flirtation. But Evelyn didn't flirt. She dissected. She investigated. She had the same air surgeons have when preparing to remove an organ. Calm, precise, dangerous in the right way. She opened the first folder. "This is Patricia," she said. "Retired so, likes Italian opera, sailing and mentoring younger entrepreneurs. She sounds like someone who might eat me alive." Evelyn hummed, turning the page. "Possibly. Next file. This one is Claire," she said. "Traveled the world. Volunteers at hospitals. Enjoys woodworking. She builds furniture? She restores antiques. That's worse. She'll restore me next." Evelyn's lips twitch, her version of a full laugh. "Richard, these are objectively impressive women." "I never said they weren't. You also haven't chosen a single one." I shrugged. "I'm discerning." "You're impossible." There was warmth in the way she said it. Teasing, but not dismissive. The office light hit her face just right, illuminating a few faint freckles I hadn't noticed before. I was cataloging freckles. This was becoming a problem. She reached for another file, but the moment her phone buzzed, her hand paused midair. She didn't check it immediately. Instead, she inhaled, sharp and quiet, and only then picked it up. Her expression flickered in a way that would have gone unnoticed by someone less invested or less nosy. But I've spent years watching markets crash and lawyers lie. I know the micro-expressions of someone pretending nothing's wrong. She set the phone down face down. "You all right?" I asked. "Yes," she said too fast. "Where were we?" "You were showing me women who will certainly outlive me." She didn't laugh this time. She simply nodded toward the files again, but she wasn't focused. She was somewhere else entirely. I studied her, the slight tension around her mouth, the way her fingers drummed a pattern on the table, the absent sheen in her eyes. Something had knocked her equilibrium off its axis. I kept flipping through profiles just long enough to let the silence settle. Then I said, "Evelyn." She didn't look up. "Yes." "Who was the message from?" Her chin lifted half an inch. Defensive posture. "I don't discuss my personal life with clients." It didn't look like personal life. It looked like concern. "Richard, you know I'm observant." "That's debatable." "It's painfully obvious," I said. "You got bad news?" She sighed, long and quiet, the kind people release when they're deciding whether to tell the truth or lock it behind a vault. Finally, she leaned back in her chair. "I'm handling it," she said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm giving." Her voice was still steady, but it was the kind of steadiness you achieve only through practice, not peace. We sat in a tense quiet for several long seconds. Then she stood. "Come with me." She led me into the back room, the one she reserved for deeper consultations. I'd been there once before, briefly. The lighting was softer, warmer, more human. Papers lay scattered across the desk, notes scribbled in multiple colors, coffee cups with lipstick marks on the rim. "This," she said, sweeping her hand over the organized chaos, "is everything that goes into my work. You're showing me your trade secrets? I'm showing you something else." She moved to the window. Her reflection appeared faintly in the glass, composed posture, tense jaw, eyes that betrayed a fraction of the turmoil she clearly didn't want to name. "You know why people come to us?" she asked. "To fight loneliness?" "To avoid it," she corrected. "Loneliness is a storm. People rush here because they hope I'll hand them an umbrella." "And you?" I asked softly. "Do you have an umbrella of your own?" She blinked. The question landed harder than I meant it to. After a moment, she said, "My job is to focus on other people's lives, not my own. That's not sustainable. It's what I have." The way she said it, it wasn't dramatic, but it was honest. More honest than she intended. Before I could push further, she turned back to the desk. "Let's talk about the Christmas gala," she said briskly. "You mentioned yesterday that you planned to attend." "You remembered." "Of course I did. And I want to bring someone," I said. "That's what we've been selecting candidates for." "Actually," I said, "I meant someone very specific." She stilled. Not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. "Who?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately. I simply looked at her. Her throat tightened. Just slightly. "Richard," she warned, stepping back as if I'd crossed a line. "You're the one person I—" "No." The word hit the air sharply. Not coldly. Not angrily. Just painfully. She shook her head. "You're my client," she said. "There are ethical boundaries. I'm not talking about anything unethical. You're talking about something impossible." Silence stretched between us. Not hostile, just thick with truths neither of us wanted to unpack. Finally, she exhaled. "Let me get the remaining profiles. We can narrow it down." She brushed past me, but her arm grazed mine, not by accident. Not on purpose. One of those ambiguous touches that ignites more confusion than clarity. She returned with another stack of folders, but as she placed them on the table, her hand trembled again. I placed my hand gently over the folder, stopping her. "Talk to me," I said quietly. She closed her eyes as if the simple request exhausted her. When she opened them, the mask slipped, only a fraction, but enough. "My brother," she said. "He's in trouble again. And when he's in trouble, he pulls me into it." Trouble. The kind of trouble that makes a woman hide fear behind professionalism. The kind that sends sharp messages in the middle of the day. "Is it serious?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "It could become serious. And you're dealing with it alone?" "I've always dealt with it alone." There was truth, naked and heavy. Something inside me shifted. I'd hired her agency out of spite, out of boredom, out of wanting to poke at my ex-wife's fragile ego. But now I cared. Not about profiles. Not about perfect matches. About Evelyn. This complicated, guarded woman who carried the weight of someone else's mistakes like it was her birthright. I stepped closer, not enough to intrude, just enough so my presence felt steady. "You don't have to handle everything alone," I said. She looked up, eyes tired but not defeated. "Richard, don't get involved." "I already am." "Why?" she whispered. Because you make me feel something I thought was gone. Because you're stronger than you realize and softer than you admit. Because every time you look away, I want to understand why. But I only said, because I want to. She shook her head as if trying to dislodge the whole conversation from reality. This isn't how matchmaking works, she muttered. Then we're doing it wrong. Her lips parted, half a protest, half a surrender she didn't want to acknowledge. Before either of us could speak again, her phone buzzed for the second time. She flinched. Not visibly to the average person, but to me, it was unmistakable. Evelyn, I said, you're not going back to ignoring that. She turned the phone around, just enough for me to see the preview of the message. A photo. Her brother outside some building, bruised, maybe scared, maybe high, I couldn't tell. Another notification popped up. We need to talk. Tonight. No delays. Her shoulders tensed like a wire pulled too tight. I looked at her. She looked at me. And just like that, the matchmaking agency, the profiles, the gala, everything became background noise. Something much bigger was stepping into the picture. I didn't know what it was yet. But I knew one thing. I wasn't about to let her face it alone. The snow had started early that evening, drifting lazily past the windows of my penthouse and blanketing the streets in that absurdly picturesque way that makes people believe in holidays and good intentions, both of which I'd spent most of my life distrusting. It didn't matter. Snow has a way of ignoring personal beliefs, and tonight, it painted my city in deceptive serenity. I stood in front of the mirror in my study, adjusting my tie for the fourth time. Evelyn had called hours earlier with instructions, be ready by 7. Dress appropriately. And don't forget, you're not attending a board meeting. You're attending a crisis. I wasn't sure what crisis meant. My experience with crises typically involved corporate raiders, angry heirs, or parties that went bankrupt midway through. None of those had ever made my heart beat like it did when I thought about Evelyn. The doorbell rang just as I slid on my coat. I opened it to find her standing there, gloves in hand, expression unreadable. A storm of calm professionalism enveloped her like a trench coat in a noir film. She looked at me briefly, head tilted slightly. Richard, she said, are you ready to complicate your life even further? I smirked, because smirking was the only appropriate response to Evelyn. Complication is my middle name. You really should get a hobby, she muttered, but it didn't reach her eyes. They were scanning me like she was trying to calculate how many seconds it would take for me to screw everything up. I followed her down the street, snow crunching under our feet, until we reached a sleek black car that waited like a low-profile fortress. Evelyn slid into the front seat without asking, and I got in behind the driver. For the first time that evening, I noticed she didn't speak. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she was measuring everything, every turn, every light, every pedestrian who might interfere. After a few blocks, she finally spoke, voice low. We're meeting someone first. Someone who knows more about you than you think. My eyebrows raised. I like where this is going. I think. You will, she said, though her tone lacked the assurance of someone who believed her own words. The car stopped in front of a modest brownstone in a quieter part of the city. Nothing fancy, nothing ostentatious, except for a small wreath on the door, tied with a ribbon that had long since faded. Evelyn knocked, waited, and then opened the door without a word. Inside, the place smelled faintly of cinnamon and pine, as if someone had attempted to channel the spirit of Christmas into a living space. A man in his early 40s, wiry and intense, greeted us. Evelyn introduced him with a glance that communicated volumes without speaking aloud. This is Peter, she said. He'll explain things better than I can. Peter's eyes met mine with something between appraisal and mild disdain. Mr. Harrington, he said, I think you've already figured out why we're here. I hadn't, but the certainty in his tone was unnerving. Go on, I said. Peter gestured for us to sit. Evelyn stayed standing, which struck me as significant. She didn't usually leave herself exposed unless she wanted to send a message or protect someone else. Probably both. Peter pulled out a folder, flipping it open to reveal documents, photos, and a handful of receipts I didn't recognize. We've been tracking a pattern, he said. Not about your finances, not about your properties, not about your business. About your personal history. I blinked. Personal history? That's broad. Very broad, Peter said, tapping a photograph. It was me 25 years ago, younger, slimmer, with hair I hadn't realized I still remembered on a subconscious level. But the photo wasn't the issue, it was who had taken it and more importantly, why it existed at all. Who what? I asked. Your past, Peter said simply. It's catching up. Not just to you, but to Evelyn as well. And now, indirectly, to me. Evelyn crossed her arms, lips tight. Richard, he's here because he needs you to understand the full context before it becomes a mess you can't contain. A thrill ran down my spine. Danger has always been more engaging than comfort, more intoxicating than champagne. Peter, I said slowly, I really don't like feeling confused before Christmas. Makes me grumpy. He smiled faintly. I'll try to keep the grumpiness minimal. For the next hour, Peter explained a series of incidents from decades ago. People I'd trusted, mistakes I hadn't known I'd made, choices that had ripple effects far beyond my comprehension. Names I recognized, some long forgotten, and one in particular that hit me like a snowball to the face. Gloria. My ex-wife. She's not just a figure from your past, Peter said. She's orchestrating things behind the scenes in ways you haven't imagined. And Evelyn, she's tangled in it whether she wants to be or not. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Peter, be concise. He doesn't need a novel. I leaned back, feeling the room tilt ever so slightly. I like novels, I muttered, mostly to myself. Peter ignored me. Gloria wants control. She wants influence. She's testing you through proxies, through chance encounters, through carefully constructed events. You think the matchmaker agency was just a whim. I felt my coffee cup tremble in my hand. I hadn't touched coffee, but I imagined it. Everything so far, Peter continued, was curated. Every candidate, every suggestion, every nudge, it wasn't random. And Evelyn, his gaze met hers, unwavering. She's the only one who can intervene in time. She swallowed, eyes sharp. I warned him, didn't I? Yes, Peter said. But not everything can be warned. Some things have to be experienced to be stopped. The implication hit me. My life, my careful, deliberate, cynical, solitary life, had been manipulated. Gloria had turned it into a chessboard, and apparently, the first piece I'd moved was me. I see, I said carefully, forcing calm into my voice. And I suppose you're the guy making sure I don't knock the board over entirely? I'm the guy trying to ensure it doesn't collapse, Peter corrected. Evelyn stepped closer. Richard, listen. You can't react with arrogance or suspicion. You have to act deliberately. Otherwise, she left the sentence hanging. That was her specialty, threatening gently. My brain churned, spinning through every potential reaction, every strategy one could deploy. And somehow, through the tension, through the sense of peril, through the unexpectedness of everything, I realized something else. I trusted her. Evelyn. More than anyone had earned my trust in decades. Fine, I said at last. We do this your way. But I reserve the right to grumble. And make witty observations. And possibly insult your coffee-making skills. Evelyn allowed a small, victorious smile. I expected nothing less. Peter stood. We need to move quickly. Tonight, you'll see the first real consequence of Gloria's orchestration. And you'll need to respond carefully. The city outside had gone completely white with snow. Every streetlight, every car, every pedestrian wrapped in winter coats looked like an extra in some sentimental holiday movie. I almost laughed. Almost. Then Peter pulled a key from his pocket. This is where it starts. Follow me. We stepped into the car, the tires crunching on fresh snow. Evelyn sat beside me this time. Closer than before, just enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her coat. I wanted to ask why she always seemed so composed even when danger loomed. But I didn't. Some questions aren't meant to be asked. Some answers come only in motion. The car drove through streets that glimmered with holiday lights, silent neighborhoods, snow-covered avenues. I realized, somewhere between 5th and 7th, that my life had been predictably unpredictable for decades. Yet, for the first time, I wasn't sure whether I wanted predictable or unpredictable. I just knew I wanted Evelyn beside me as the story unfolded. We arrived at a townhouse that looked ordinary in every way. The door opened to a small living room illuminated by a single chandelier and the glow of a Christmas tree. And there, sitting calmly as if expecting us, was Gloria. She smiled, cold, measured, perfectly poised. Well, Richard, she said, her tone light, it seems you've finally arrived. And that, I realized, was precisely the moment I should have felt nervous. But instead, all I felt was that familiar thrill, the one that makes you realize that sometimes the messiest crises are the ones you're strangely grateful to face. Evelyn touched my arm lightly, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. I exhaled. Gloria, I said, with a hint of irony in my voice, You always did know how to throw a party. And the game, one I hadn't realized I'd been playing all along, had officially begun. I've always found it fascinating how certain moments in life feel like theater before the curtains even rise. The lights are up, the audience is silent, and yet the actors, none of whom have a script, walk on stage anyway. Tonight was one of those moments, except I was both the audience and the main character, and somehow, for the first time in decades, I had no idea if I'd even recognized the plot. Gloria's townhouse smelled faintly of pine, cinnamon, and control. That last one isn't something you typically experience in a scent, but it was there, palpable in the way she straightened a cushion or adjusted the angle of a framed photograph. She wore red, as one does at Christmas if one wishes to signal both festivity and war. Evelyn stood beside me, calm and poised as ever, though I noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders. Her hand brushed mine, not intentionally perhaps, but just enough to remind me that we were allies in this absurd battlefield. I almost asked her if she'd ever considered becoming a spy. She probably would have laughed, then reminded me that spies deal with less chaos than matchmaking agencies. Gloria clapped once, sharply, the sound echoing through the room. "Well, Richard," she said, "I suppose you're curious why I invited you here." I tilted my head, adopting my best imitation of the bored but watchful tycoon. "Curiosity is overrated, but I'll indulge you. Enlighten me." "You've been playing a game without knowing the rules," she replied, her smile calm but razor-edged. "And now it's time for you to see the board." I swallowed. Gloria never played casual games. Everything she touched ended up with consequences, carefully measured and often painful. "Evelyn, you didn't tell me she had, strategies," I whispered, nodding subtly toward my matchmaker. She shrugged lightly. "She's Gloria. I warned you it wouldn't be simple." Gloria raised an eyebrow at me. "And yet here you are, 70, still thinking you can predict human behavior. Charming." I grinned. "Predictable humans are boring. I prefer chaos with style." Her lips curved ever so slightly. "Well, Richard, consider tonight a lesson in chaos." A bell rang somewhere in the townhouse, soft but clear. A subtle reminder that time moves independently of our intentions. Then came the first piece of chaos. A young woman appeared in the doorway, carrying a small wrapped gift. She looked startled by our presence. Then, carefully, she placed the gift on the table. "She's?" I began. Evelyn whispered, "One of the people Gloria has been using to test you." The woman turned to me. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Harrington," she said, voice trembling slightly. "She asked me to deliver this." I raised an eyebrow. The gift was small, wrapped in simple paper, yet there was something deliberate in the way it was tied. I carefully untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside was a delicate music box. I turned the key, and the soft notes of a waltz filled the room. Gloria's eyes sparkled, though not with mirth. "Recognize it?" she asked. I nodded slowly. The melody was the one my late wife had played on our first Christmas together, decades ago. A memory I had buried deliberately, one I'd not thought of in years. "You always remember the wrong things," Gloria said softly, almost fondly, "but you never forget entirely. That's what makes you interesting." Evelyn's hand found mine briefly. "She's good at manipulating emotions," she murmured. "Manipulating?" "She's an artist," I whispered back. Gloria walked closer. "Richard, do you see now why I hired proxies, orchestrated events, involved people you thought were unrelated? It's because you're stubborn, and I wanted to see if you could rise above the obvious." "And if I can't?" I asked, meeting her gaze evenly. "Then you learn the hard way," she said almost kindly. The room felt smaller, though nothing had changed physically. Something in the air had shifted. Tension, expectation, history, all compressed into a single space like a snow globe I didn't want to shake. Then Evelyn spoke, firm and clear. "Richard, we're not here to argue history. We're here to act. You need to respond carefully." I looked at her, then at Gloria, and realized something profound. I hadn't felt truly alive in years, not like this. The stakes were real. The risks tangible. And for once, I wasn't entirely alone. "Fine," I said finally. "Let's see how this works. Show me the board, Gloria. Let's play." Gloria smiled, thin, precise, almost predatory. "I'm glad you understand the rules. But beware. The game doesn't end with winning or losing. It ends with realization." And that, I realized, was exactly why I had hired Evelyn. To navigate this board. To survive. And, perhaps, to learn something about love in the process. Outside, the snow continued to fall, ignorant of board games, human scheming, or the slow unfolding of hearts in conflict. I, Richard Harrington, was about to find out just how complicated a Christmas could get. Christmas Eve has a way of exaggerating everything. The lights, the colors, the feelings, even the mistakes. By the time I stepped into Gloria's townhouse that night, the snow outside had stopped falling, leaving the city glistening like a world someone had polished just to torment romantics and cynics alike. Somewhere in between, Evelyn was beside me, as composed as ever, though I could feel the slight tension in her shoulders. That tension wasn't from the cold, nor from the snow, nor from my ongoing charm offensive, which she usually tolerated with a grace that deserved medals. No, it was because we both knew that tonight, everything would be decided. Gloria awaited us in the living room, framed by the Christmas tree and the soft glow of candles. Her smile was calm, but sharper than any blade I've seen in my life. "Richard," she said, voice smooth and controlled. "Welcome back. Ready to play the final round?" I raised an eyebrow. I thought we were already playing chess. Now it's poker. "Life doesn't follow one game," she replied. "Sometimes it's chess. Sometimes it's poker. Sometimes it's Russian roulette with snowflakes." I tried not to laugh, but Evelyn's hand brushed mine, a small, grounding gesture, and I realized that laughter would have been dangerous anyway. Tonight wasn't about jokes, it was about decisions. And, perhaps, about finally facing something I'd avoided my whole life, love that wasn't convenient, predictable, or safe. Gloria clapped once, sharply. "Enough chatter. It's time to see the results of my orchestration." A young man entered, carrying a tablet. He looked nervous, which I found oddly reassuring. Probably because I recognized the look. It was the same look I'd had in countless board meetings when I was trying to pretend I understood everything. Gloria nodded at him. "Show him." The screen lit up, displaying photos, messages, and carefully documented events. Every step I'd taken, every profile Evelyn had suggested, every hesitation, and every impulsive choice, all carefully catalogued and framed. Even the music box from the night before. "You see," Gloria said, "every detail, orchestrated or observed, feeds into one lesson. Nothing in life happens in isolation. Not even love." I stared at the screen, digesting what she'd laid out. The manipulations, the networks, the seemingly random encounters, it all connected. And buried in the chaos, I saw Evelyn's careful, quiet work. She hadn't just managed the agency, she had protected me, guided me, and perhaps even saved me from myself. I looked at her, and for a moment, she met my gaze without flinching. That was new. "You've done more than matchmake," I said quietly. "You've managed my survival." She exhaled softly. "And you've done more than hire me, Richard. You've been engaged. Emotionally, I mean, whether you notice it or not." I felt a strange heat rise to my cheeks, and I knew she was right. My usual detachment, the cynicism, the armor, had crumbled somewhere between the profiles and the crises and the unexpected kindness of a woman who refused to let me fail. Gloria, meanwhile, continued her monologue. "And now you face the culmination. Choose carefully. The consequences of indecision are often worse than the consequences of action." I studied her, Evelyn, the room, the lights, the symbolic Christmas chaos. And then I realized, I didn't need to choose anyone, but one person had already chosen me in the ways that mattered. Evelyn. Her courage, her intelligence, her willingness to stand beside me in the storm, those were the qualities no profile, no manipulation, no proxy could replace. I took a step toward her. "Evelyn," I said, voice steady despite the rapid beat of my heart. "I've spent my life believing that love was a transaction, a game, a hazard. But I see now that it's neither. It's a choice. And tonight I choose you." Her eyes widened slightly, and then a rare, genuine smile broke across her face. A smile that made the world, Gloria, the snow, the orchestrated chaos, fade for just a moment. Gloria, predictably, didn't show emotion. She merely inclined her head, acknowledging the decision. "Interesting," she said. "I suppose even I underestimated you." Evelyn reached for my hand, the touch solid, reassuring. "Richard," she said softly, "you really don't have to act alone anymore." I laughed quietly, a sound somewhere between relief and disbelief. I've been acting alone for 70 years. But tonight seems like a good night to start acting together. Then, as if to punctuate the moment, the music box from the previous night began to play again, soft, whimsical, nostalgic. I realized Gloria must have orchestrated it to coincide with this moment. Typical of her. Ruthless, brilliant, dramatic. But harmless in its finality. We both laughed at the absurdity of it, because laughter is the best weapon against chaos. And then we kissed, not the cautious, tentative kind, but the kind that makes you forget time, history, even the snow outside. Gloria cleared her throat. Do you two mind? We broke apart just enough to see her standing there, arms crossed, a small smirk betraying amusement. Merry Christmas, she said. And Richard, consider this, the beginning of your education. Love is more dangerous than any merger, more unpredictable than any market, and far more rewarding. I looked at Evelyn, our fingers entwined, hearts racing in the quiet aftermath of revelation. I think I can handle it, I said. You'd better, she replied, with a hint of a smirk that matched my own. Outside, the city glittered under streetlights, snow crystals glinting like tiny stars. It was chaotic, bright, absurd, and utterly alive, the perfect reflection of everything that had just happened inside Gloria's townhouse. And for the first time in years, I felt the thrill of life itself, not just the calculated safety of wealth or control. I had a lot to learn. About trust, about forgiveness, about timing, and yes, about love. But I knew this. With Evelyn by my side, even the messiest, most manipulative Christmas could be beautiful. And maybe, just maybe, even a cynical old millionaire could finally believe in a little magic.